From Ethan and April's final breakup that broke our hearts, to the time Dr. Daniel Charles lost his wife to cancer, these are the moments where Chicago Med got serious. Seriously sad, that is. Chexton was the couple we were all so invested in. Let's talk about the tumultuous romance between Dr. Ethan Choi and Nurse April Sexton. They had a real up and down relationship, always with lots of love between them, but they just couldn't seem to make things work. Their story was a real will they, won't they kind of deal with lots of twists and turns. But in season 5, things became really rough when April admitted to kissing Dr. Crockett Marcel. Ethan didn't handle it well and ended up in a fist fight with his colleague. You could tell Ethan was really struggling with the fact that his connection with April was slipping away. In one really heart-wrenching moment, Ethan coldly told April he was leaving to stay in a hotel and that she needed to start looking for a new place to live. It was really tough watching April leave while crying and not knowing what was going to happen next. When Yaya DaCosta left the show before season 7, it seemed like they would never be able to make their relationship work. Everyone was heartbroken, to say the least. But you know what they say, never say never. You see, after a few emotionally charged run-ins, the two former flames officially got back together again. Seriously, their relationship broke my heart so many times over. Then there was the time that Natalie dumped Philip and rejected Will at the same time. In season 5 of the show, something pretty wild happens to Dr. Natalie Manning. She and Dr. Will Halstead are attacked, leaving Natalie in a coma caused by a traumatic brain injury. But when she wakes up, she's got an engagement ring on her finger. It turns out her boyfriend, Philip Davis, proposed to her while she was briefly unconscious. But here's the twist. Natalie doesn't remember saying yes because of her brain injury. Will figures out that Philip actually put the ring on her finger while she was out cold, tricking her into thinking that she said yes. Natalie gets pretty upset when she finds out what actually happened and gives the ring back to Philip. She had already been thinking about breaking up with him, and this just confirmed that it was the right thing to do. Things became even more complicated when Philip accuses Will of trying to sabotage their relationship. It's all pretty messy, and you can't help but feel bad for Natalie. She's had enough of all these guys meddling in her life, and she finally tells Will to get lost. It's definitely a tough situation for everyone involved. As regular fans, you couldn't help but feel bad for all three of them. Honestly, the romances of Chicago Med do get a bit difficult to keep up with. A few episodes later, Natalie tells Will that she loves him, but he rejects her. So the tables have turned, and Will was more or less done with Natalie's hot and cold responses. I mean, she's been through some pretty traumatic experiences, but that doesn't give her the right to hurt Will, right? They have us in this constant will they, won't they situation, so it's really no surprise that they're on the list twice. It was pretty sad once we got closure on their relationship. A few episodes after Natalie tells Will to get out of her life, she finds him on the hospital's roof. She explains that her memory has come back and that she remembered that she planned to tell him she loved him before their accident. She also tells him that she doesn't want him out of her life, but Will responds that it's too late for that now. He even calls their relationship toxic, telling her that the distance made him realize that he was better off without her. All they ever did was hurt each other. He admits that there was a time when he couldn't imagine a life without her, but now that they were apart, he felt freer than ever before. He then leaves Natalie and the rest of us to cry it out alone. Then there was that time when Dr. Charles left a rose for his wife. In this scene, Dr. Daniel Charles, played by Oliver Platt, really tugs at the heartstrings. He's normally the composed and steady force on the show, but when his wife Caroline, played by Paula Newsome, passes away from lymphoma, it's just devastating. What makes it even more heart-wrenching is that they had gotten remarried during her treatment after previously getting divorced. Even though he had been married to other women before Caroline, her death hits him incredibly hard. In one episode titled Guess It Doesn't Matter Anymore from season 5, he visits her grave and leaves a white rose. He sits on a bench near her crypt, lost in thought and emotions, with a cup of coffee in his hand. The snow is melting and dripping around him, and he can't help but break down and cry. It's a powerful moment that shows how much he loved Caroline, even without saying anything. The scene really encapsulates what grief feels like. I really think this one might be the saddest of them all. The next moment on my list is both disturbing and sad. Dr. Ava Becker becomes a murderer and then takes her own life. Things really took a dark turn in Chicago Med. It was when Becker, played by Norma Cooling, was rejected by Dr. Connor Rhodes, played by Colin Donnell. Instead of just moving on, she takes things to a whole other level and decides to kill his father father, Cornelius. She does this hoping that Connor will turn to her for comfort in his grief. Eventually, Connor figures out that Ava is responsible for his father's death. When he confronts her about it, she admits it but chooses to end her own life instead of facing the consequences. She takes a scalpel and slits her carotid artery, bleeding out right in front of him. It's a really intense scene, and Connor tries his best to save her, but unfortunately it's too late.
Dr. Rhodes, Dr. Rhodes, she's gone.
The whole situation is incredibly traumatic for Connor, and he leaves Chicago Med because of it. It was also tough for the audience to watch, especially because both Ava and Connor left the show in the same episode. It's definitely one of the more shocking and heartbreaking moments in the series.
Time of death is 1622.
But maybe one of the most heartbreaking episodes was Season 2, Episode 14, titled Blizzard. This is the episode where there's heavy snowfall, which results in a car wreck. The patient is brought in with full body burns. We already know he's not going to make it. Even the patient himself knows, but we keep hoping against hope. Dr. Choi is looking after him, and the patient asks the doctor to at least try to keep him alive until his wife makes it to the hospital. But there was absolute chaos in the ER that day, and priority is given to patients who have a chance of making it after the needed treatment. Even with all that going on, Dr. Choi still tries to save him, but at one point the patient realizes that it's just not going to happen. In a really tender moment, he grabs Dr. Choi's hand, as if to say, that's enough. His wife does eventually make it to the hospital, but it's just a few moments too late.
20 Vitamidate and 15 Brockronium.
There's another scene that even made the crew cry, and that was from Season 7, Episode 4.
Mom! Mom, where are you?
I'm right here, baby.
Guy Lockard, who plays Dr. Dylan Scott, said that during the filming, even the camera crew was crying. In the scene, a patient is experiencing some serious psychological distress in broad daylight.
The man is experiencing a psychiatric episode. Please. Just let me work with him.
So a crowd gathers and even the police show up. The patient is flailing and it only adds to the chaos. That's when Dr. Scott steps in to de-escalate the situation. He was able to calm down the patient successfully and the police, who had their guns drawn out at them.
I'm in. It's all right. It's all right.
I think it was mostly disturbing because the patient could have been shot had the doctor not been there. It was a really close call. So, from the tumultuous relationships in the ER to scenes that made us cry our hearts out, those were just some of the times when Chicago Med got really serious.